of Ardmore's Public Library. As I'm hurtling towards my final swim meet that I need to attend to, as my high schooler leaves the nest soon. We're doing one last summer swim meet. I keep saying it. She better not have another one. And always excited to be here and talk to you guys. I'm going to share my screen, I guess is the deal. Boom, right. I'm going to share it. We're going to go with this. We're going to see how suave I have become over these. Boosh. How is that? Do I need to minimize you guys? Can you see you guys too?
Looks great. Yeah, you're
awesome. Good. Okay. So today I'm talking to you guys about the Tennessee Rescue Plan competitive grant program, specifically the resource protection overview for that competitive offering. And so there are two others that we won't really hit on, but thought this was the most applicable to this group. This is part of DWR's funding assistance programs. I have been talking to this group for a couple of years now, and I think probably 3 years ago, I started coming to TENSA meetings and regional meetings talking about SRF and potential stormwater grants. And today I'm happy to announce, right, we have really implemented some of the loftier things that we have hoped to start, right? Start for this group. And one of those updates is, of course, that the State Water Infrastructure Grant Program that's executing the competitive grants has now been combined with the state revolving fund loan program. And so I now manage both funding assistance programs for the Division of Water, and that's going to help us open up even more opportunities for our stormwater MS4s and the like, because I see a real, potential for that being a good area for assistance for this kind of group. And I think it also helps support that natural resource protection priority that is part of the DWR and TDEC mission. I'll give you guys an overview of the competitive grant program. Newsflash, that grant closes on August 8th, and it is competitive, so make sure you are aware of, and we'll talk about that deadline a couple more times, aware of that deadline, you've written it down, if you intend to apply, that you have a good solid application when you submit, because you won't be able to come back in and like massage it to make it even better, right? We have to evaluate you based on the completeness and compelling application that you give us when it closes. We'll do a deep dive in resource protection, look at the application itself, and then I have here OSG grant, and I have a few slides on that. We have launched the Stormwater Grant Program. We have 3 communities that have been awarded that initial stormwater grant, and I can talk about that a little later. But I also wrote down in my notebook, this is also a good group to talk about the other 2 grants that we'll be releasing as part of the funding assistance program using SRF money through our SWIG grant program to issue grants to like MS4s, wastewater facilities and drinking water facilities for things like lead service lines, emerging contaminants of concern, and asset management plans. As always, I'm here to take questions. We have folks monitoring the chat, and I will really, I really relish having an interactive meeting. If y'all feel the need to kind of stop me midway and ask a really pertinent question, I don't mind it at all. I enjoy the interaction. So with that, I'll dive in, okay? Maybe. Well, the slide's not, there we go. Okay, funding assistance, Division of Water Resources funding assistance programs. We have the State Water Infrastructure Grant Program and the State Revolving Fund Program. We are working diligently as a group to provide, loans and grants so that we can continue to support that TDEC mission, to provide clean, safe, and reliable water systems. We are going to support that in this program by supporting the Division of Water Resource, help ensure that systems comply with their MPDES permit, MS4 permit, PWSID rules, and then kind of push the boundaries of those additional like resource protection concepts when we think about natural hydrology and our natural systems. So the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Loan Program, which is an applicable program for MS4 to utilize either grants or loans. We have in the past, I don't know, 15 years provided over $1 billion in assistance. I think over the lifetime from construction grants and loans in 1987 to today, we're well over $1 billion, but the modern kind of SRF is about around that. And if you don't know, we provide low interest loans and assistance to cities, counties, utility districts, and stormwater authorities for planning, design, and construction of wastewater and stormwater systems. The SRF is designated as a federal state, or is designed as a federal and state partnership to assist public wastewater and stormwater systems to remain compliant with state and federal requirements. So the federal government gives us capitalization grants every year for clean water and asks us that we issue those capitalization grants as assistance in the form of loans that may contain principal forgiveness or loan forgiveness. And now they've also started incorporating a larger call for us to use that cap money for granting assistance. So that leads us to the State Water Infrastructure Grant Program. It is a brand new program. It's not a division. I didn't catch that on the slide, but it is a program that is part of TDEC's Division of Water Resources. And we initially were formed as support for the rollout of ARP funds, right? And we have been deploying $1 billion worth of non-competitive and then 200 million in competitive, which is why we're here today. And we are now really a companion program to SRF supporting that TDEC mission. So super cool. Why would TDEC even do this? Well, TDEC recognizes that the pivotal role stormwater plays in a community's water infrastructure systems and has worked to increase the funding available to improve these systems. So, right, 3 years ago, we started talking a lot. I've worked with our attorneys and the SRF program to modify our statutes for clean water, as well as take a look at modifying our rules in the future to make sure there's clearly that legal legal roadmap that says stormwater and MS4s are an eligible entity to receive any of this funding assistance, and to really emphasize that point on how we want to build out a funding program for MS4s. We put a strong emphasis on stormwater in our water infrastructure investment plan, where we are executing the $1 billion+ dollars. For the non-competitive, we had 77 stormwater projects. And a lot of these were stormwater management master plans, all the way from like a full-blown robust program to mapping the existing system. But we also had a lot of stormwater programs or counties and cities who are required to manage their stormwater come in and ask for assistance to help replace old gray stormwater infrastructure, as well as install, design and install newer green infrastructure around their community. We are entering the competitive phase, and we're in the middle of the competitive phase, and that's a bucket of $50 million that we're also dedicating specifically towards resource protection. So we're going to talk a lot about resource protection, and then a little bit about some of those other things. All right. So the competitive grant program is $200 million total bucket, of which we allotted $50 million for resource protection. And this includes projects that improve water infrastructure resilience to extreme weather, improve stormwater management or water quality, and or restore natural landscapes for improved hydrology. When we originally categorized this use of $50 million, we titled it differently, but based on feedback from the governor's office, we made a more holistic term that we could all get behind, and that's resource protection. So you'll see when we kind of define the expectations of a resource protection grant, some really familiar themes. Here's the timeline as we are executing this opportunity. We released the grant manuals in March. We opened the application in May. And like I said, August 8th, we closed that application. We anticipate the review and ranking process, along with coupled with getting an executed contract, to take between that second week of August to the end of February. And if you've ever worked with the state of Tennessee, you probably are gasping for breath because that timeline is lightning fast. And lucky for us, we have some assistance with that. And we work with a consulting firm, Ernst & Young, so that you can be rest assured there is not just me and Seth and a couple of other folks behind the scenes trying to get all of this deployed for anybody who participates in this competitive application. We have a significant team behind us who make sure we try and stay on track. Once you submit your application, you cannot modify it. And applicants should consider ongoing projects in which additional projects may be feasible in the ARP timeline. So the ARP timeline is that you'll get an executed contract sometime in February, January, maybe even December, but February 2024, you'll have until September 30th, 2026 to complete, to absolutely complete that project, right? Complete and finalize that project. That timeline will not change. September 30th, 2026 is a reflection of US Treasury's timeline that TDEC has to have all the money accounted for and projects closed out by December 31st, 2026. It will take an act of Congress, right? US Congress, to actually change those dates. So, and TDEC does not anticipate those dates changing. So it's important when you apply that you identify either existing projects or ongoing projects that you can expand, that you have a reason, there is a reasonable reasonable feasibility of completing that project in a timely manner. All right. So we'll be also kind of considering that when we look at these applications. If, for example, you have a 15,000 linear foot stream restoration project that you have just identified the stream system. You're like, oh my gosh, I've never seen the stream system before. It's in such bad shape. I bet you I can do a 15,000 linear foot stream restoration project, full scale, top to bottom, on this site. You probably won't be able to squeeze that within the timeline that we have, because you still have to go through the process of evaluating the current conditions of the stream, securing all of the site, securing that entire site. Probably don't own it. Going through the process of getting an environmental review, right? When you have a large scale project like that, you need a 401 and a 404, and maybe 3 other permits to boot. And then construction start, and it can take a significant amount of time to complete that. So think about that when you propose projects. Incomplete applications may not be considered for funding. Each contract will be individualized based on the proposed scope of work and project timeline. And then once the applicants are awarded, once the grantees are announced, right, and the grants are awarded, announced, not, or awarded, announced, right, not executed contracts, we may come back and ask you to have some discussions with us on potential modification, or certain management, project management discussions, just to make sure that we're all on the right track and understand the scope of the project is right sized for the funding that we intend to award, as well as the timeline in which it needs to be executed. We may or may not fund your full proposal if you're selected, right? You might be awarded a grant and we might only be able to fund partial amount. So what are some of the general ground rules for this grant? Each application should only include one project, right? One application, one project. For proposals with partners, a lead applicant must be identified, right? One entity that has legal authority over that grant proposal and the money that will be associated with it. TDEC will enter a grant contract with the lead applicant to execute all activities. We will not be entering into an agreement with the lead applicant and others. We will not be reimbursing to the lead applicant and others. We will only be, we'll be solely focused on that contractual relationship between TDEC and the lead applicant, so that we all have a common level of responsibility, I guess. Applicants may submit multiple proposals as the lead applicant. This is unique to the Resource Protection Grant. I anticipated that there might be some entities out there that have several ideas. Several ideas about projects that they have been waiting to execute in their area. You may have 2 or 3 really good projects in mind that we can fund. You may have 2 or 3 really good projects and we can only fund 1. So we want to see definitely all of the project ideas that you guys have that will fit in this resource protection category that you think are worthy and can be executed by September 30th, 2026. Applicants may submit a proposal for all 3 of the grant programs if they are an eligible entity. This will not affect the ranking and evaluation of each application. So say the city of Chattanooga wants to submit a reuse, wastewater reuse application. That is a grant category. They can do that. That's awesome. They come back and say, we also want to do a resource protection grant application. That's great too. It won't affect how we rank one or the other. But please note that your non-competitive grant funds cannot be used as match funding for the competitive grant proposals and vice versa. State ARP dollars, that 1.35 billion bucket, can't be matched with itself in order to meet the grant criteria, right? So you need to make sure that you are sourcing additional funds if you have match or when match is required. So let's talk about the resource protection grant, and we'll give a brief overview. Resource protection for this grant opportunity is defined as projects that improve water infrastructure resilience to extreme weather events, improve stormwater management or water quality, and or restore natural landscape features for improved hydrology. What kinds of things are project eligible? We have 3 subcategories within resource protection. Stormwater management, which is the management of wet weather to maintain and restore natural hydrology by infiltrating, evapotranspirating, harvesting, or reusing stormwater. Stream or wetland rehabilitation, and this would be really improving the current stream or wetland function and returning the feature to a more stable state, therefore providing improved resource values. Or you may have an infrastructure resilience project. It's a project that reduces the vulnerability of facilities and assets to man-made or natural disasters, such as extreme weather events. When you're applying, you really have to select one of these subcategories for the full suite of application requirements. You may have a stormwater management project that also provides infrastructure resilience, but primarily it's a stormwater management project. You should make sure that you're selecting that subcategory when you're filling out your application. When you get to that application, you will have to state what kind of project it is, right? Is it an investigation and planning type project? Is it a planning, design, and construction type project? Or maybe it's construction only because you already have plans and specs and are ready to go. For the entities that are eligible to apply for this grant, we have the typical counties and cities. We expanded this 50 million and basically the 200 million across the board, but specifically for this 50 million to water utility districts, water utility authorities, and 501c3 nonprofits, right? We really thought that resource protection, that there might be a lot of folks out there associated with TWRA or Harpeth or Compact that may be interested in accessing this $50 million. So 501c3s are now eligible. What is ineligible are projects that result in an appreciable permanent loss of water resource value and require stream or wetland compensatory mitigation. So you'll notice, many of you probably will notice that there are specific words on this slide, resource values, appreciable permanent loss, wet weather, stormwater, stream wetland rehabilitation, that all have like legal weight when reflected with like TDEC, Division of Water Resources, rules and statutes. So we intentionally use those. So you should think about that when you're applying for projects, right? We cannot authorize a project or a project would be ineligible if you did, if you said, well, I want to protect this stream by riprapping it for 1,000 linear feet on both sides. That would, probably end up in a permit that would require compensatory mitigation. Therefore, it would be ineligible. So, continuing on with the theme of resource protection defined. Projects should focus on green infrastructure while minimizing components of gray. Entities are encouraged to look at the Clean Water State Revolving Fund eligibility activity guidebook, and we have links to that on the ARP website. When you get this presentation, those highlighted will be hyperlinked. And also refer to EPA's, this is really specific, 2012 Clean Water State Revolving Fund 10% Green Project Reserve guidance for determining project eligibility. Specifically, section 1 of that document outlines a lot of the green infrastructure that we're looking for. The use of gray infrastructure for protection efforts may be an SRF eligible activity, but applicants should consider alignment with the intent of the resource protection grant. It's not saying that if your project requires gray components, that doesn't mean that it will be discounted, not ranked or ineligible. It's completely eligible. It's probably completely eligible, right? And we will rank it. And to that, we don't require a specific percentage of green activities to gray activities in any proposal, but right, this resource protection intent is really to help kind of foster a little more of the gray infrastructure or the green infrastructure elements while balancing our need for gray infrastructure, right? There will be some instances, I'm sure, where we need some gray infrastructure, and that's okay too. So, a deep dive on eligible activities. Stormwater management efforts that focus on the management of wet weather to maintain and restore natural hydrology by infiltrating, evapotranspirating, harvesting, and reusing stormwater is what we're looking for. Projects may be at the regional scale, things like preservation of the landscape and restoration of natural features. Maybe it's at the local scale, such as a site or neighborhood specific. So those practices would be like bioretention trees, green roofs, permeable pavers. This is not news to you guys. One really important element, flood control projects are not an eligible activity. For clean water SRF period, projects that are specifically designed for flood control are not eligible unless that flood control is like protecting the drinking water treatment plant. But that's a different thing, right? So for this stormwater management, they can't be flood control projects, even though we know there may be co-benefits, right, for doing a water quality a stormwater management project that focuses on water quality, infiltration, etc., may have some flood mitigating positive effects. Stormwater reuse activities are eligible under this resource protection grant. We wouldn't want you to put them in the water reuse grant. That's really for drinking water and wastewater systems. Applicants should demonstrate how their project measurably improves those variables of infiltration, capture, etc., or measurably change land use cover from gray to green within a specific catchment or basin. Applicants should identify pollutants of concern and the positive water quality benefits due to the stormwater management practices. Applicants should quantify stormwater management and water quality benefits using common tools you guys are probably familiar with, like the 10-RAT or other approved assessment methodology. So what about stream or wetland rehabilitation? So we're defining this as projects that include the enhancement and restoration of streams or wetlands, stream bank stabilization, or low-head dam removal projects. Projects should focus primarily on improving the current stream or wetland function and returning the feature to a more stable state, therefore providing improved resource value. Again, this slide and this block specifically is loaded with legally relevant words in terms of the division of water and how we manage our natural resources. Any natural resource rehabilitation project must maintain or improve aquatic connectivity and be designed as such that there is an overall improved resource value. So what do applicants need to do? They should determine the restoration potential. Describe their site selection methodologies. Why did you select this site? Those project-specific function-based goals and objectives should be defined. They should describe the potential for functional lift at a site, the success criteria, develop a monitoring plan, and complete these steps using a quantitative assessment tool or other approved scientific method. A tool that I am most familiar with and where a lot of these words are generating from is the stream quantification tool. You can find that tool on Division of Water's Natural Resource Units site, where we do aquatic resource alteration permits and compensatory mitigation. And it talks about a lot of these terminologies like restoration potential and site selection. We are not relegated to only using the SQT or the TRAM, the Tennessee the Tennessee Rapid Assessment Methodology for wetlands. We're not relegated to only using those. If an entity comes forward with a different quantitative assessment tool that is valid for the project. But we do want to see improvement, right? And that is that potential for functional lift. We can propose or predict what we think the improvement would be at a site, but later then we have to go and measure it. And that's why we would have a monitoring plan and expect report backs from the grantee on how that functional lift is going. These projects are also not compensatory mitigation. So we won't be establishing an expectation or a requirement that a stream that is not functioning at all is lifted to something that's functioning at risk. That might be completely valid for that site. So that kind of equalizes the perceived value or maybe functional lift of a more rural stream versus an urban stream, both that need to be assisted in getting back to that reference condition, but maybe the rural stream provides bigger lift faster and the urban stream, maybe it's marginal. The magnitude of that lift is not really a part of our factoring for whether or it's not a make or break for a project in terms of whether or not it would be supported for award. So what are some of the other requirements? Applicants must provide a rehabilitation plan if you are doing a stream or wetland rehabilitation project, including a schedule for completion of all construction and monitoring measures. Natural resource rehabilitation projects often require an individual ARP. That's fine, but we have to be involved in talking about that through the process. Some projects may require long-term inspection, maintenance, and management following construction. Applicants should include this process information if applicable. Now, if you get an individual ARAP and they say you have to monitor for 7 years, your grant contract with me will not be 7 years long. However, we will communicate with, as a team, the natural resource unit who oversees the primary component of that monitoring and talk through, their timelines and our timelines to make sure everybody's aware. If the permit requires you to do it, that's one thing. And we're not going to affect that with our grant, but know that there might be different requirements still, just a companion to the permit, right? Not in lieu of, that may have different timescales. So what about reporting? Projects focused on stream and wetland restoration, rehab, or bank stabilization will have application and reporting requirements that may differ from traditional infrastructure projects. Pre and post project requirements may be similar to reporting requirements found in TDEC stream mitigation guidelines or as part of that TRAM, depending on the project scope and complexity. And everybody's encouraged to use the stream quantification tool if you know how to use it and it's applicable to your project. If you don't know how to use it, or you have another methodology or would like to seek out another methodology, contact us for guidance. We'll be happy to help you. Additional subcategories is the infrastructure resilience category. And those are projects that reduce the vulnerability of drinking water and wastewater facilities and assets to man-made or natural disasters. Infrastructure resilience projects can aim to prevent interruption of services, maintain the integrity of the system, preserve and protect the facility or assets, enhance community resilience through improved stormwater management, secure and conserve local water supplies through water reuse and conservation. So really thinking about infrastructure resilience projects aiming to manage issues that arise in the event of a flood, drought, or natural disaster. Applicants should demonstrate that project outcomes will result in improved facility or asset performance following those man-made or natural disasters. And we've provided some resources for you to help you build out that project proposal, give you some good ideas about what we're talking about in this presentation. You can access it when you get the PowerPoint. So some of the housekeeping and administrative components, right? The funding total to be awarded for all resource protection grants is $50 million. That's a pretty nice big bucket. Generally, we think the proposal max budget, depending on your project award type, is shown in this table here, right? Your construction only project, it doesn't have to be $5 million. Maybe you have a $3 million construction only project. Maybe you have a $10 million construction project, and this is a phase of it. But please note, when you're creating your budgets, those budget maximums represent the proposal's total project budget, which includes the grant amount, which is reimbursable, and the applicable co-funding. So that $5 million for construction only, if that's your max budget, it includes the amount you're asking DWR for and the amount that you're going to co-fund with, knowing that and that $5 million is a hard cap, right? If this is phase 2 of a 5-phase project, don't establish your budget cap or your project proposal budget cap at $10 million, right, for phase 1 and phase 2, and then say, oh, but we're only asking you for $5 million, because that will automatically kind of it will disqualify your application because you went over the budget max. So make sure we welcome you providing that information if it's a phase, part of a bigger project, and it's a phase of a larger project in the narrative, but we don't want to see you put that in the actual proposal budget in the application. So what about co-funding? Everybody is going to be required to provide co-funding for the competitive grant program. We're basing your co-funding amounts on the 2022 ability to pay index, which is a number that ranges in integrals of 10 from 0 to 100. And that ATPI is established at the city and county level. And we'll be looking at what's the major service area of your project. So what's the ATPI of that project area? The required co-funding percentage will be based on the ATPI of the grant applicant, right? And then there are no co-funding reductions for this grant offering. These are it, right? If you have an ATPI of less than 60, you've got a 5% co-funding all the way up to having an ATPI of 100. you have 20% co-funding. So that's an 80-20 match at the top end. That's not bad at all. That's a pretty good deal. So how do you meet that co-funding expectation? Well, there's a couple of ways. You can use cash reserves. This can consist of your local ARP funds. Maybe it's an SRF loan, other financial assistance loans, revenue bonds, public-private partnerships or sponsorships, or other cash value contributions, including engineering plans developed on or after March 3rd, 2021. It could be in-kind action or funds, right? Labor, equipment services, or material contributions. TDEC will consider using in-kind co-funding contributions, and if an individual accountability report is completed and submitted with your application. Treasury rule note. Treasury's final rule allows for the use of ARP funds as a match for other grant programs where the costs are eligible under both programs. The entire project is subject to the requirements of those grant programs. Local or state ARP funds cannot be used as match for grant programs that restrict the use of federal funds to meet the match requirements. What does that mean? I don't know. No. So ARC, Appalachian Regional Council, or I think it's council, grants are common grants in East Tennessee. ARC grants require a match. TDEC does not prohibit you from using your ARP grant award as match to those programs. That's your prerogative. What you have to do, though, is clear with that grantor, right? Ask your grant administrator for ARC. Is ARC okay with us using ARP funds to match that grant? And if they are, and they are, you may have requirements placed on your ARP grant that mirror your ARC grant requirements. For example, ARP does not require American iron and steel. ARC may require American iron and steel. If you use ARP dollars to match your ARC grant, you may require to ensure American iron and steel is in use for the entire project, regardless of where the funds came from. So keep that in mind when you are leveraging funding assistance by different programs. So what are the application requirements? Well, your project really needs to align with the definition of resource protection, and that's critical in determining whether or not your project is suitable. You have to define specific activities. Those activities need to be eligible under the resource protection grant, and you need to provide a compelling case. You need to select a path, provide most information that would give you the most points. And we have a rubric laid out in the grant manual to help you understand where all of the points are coming from. The components of that submission, right? You have to designate a grant applicant and partners if you have them. Demonstration of conservation easement or other protective covenant for stream or wetland restorations, bank stabilizations, or dam removals, right? Like, are you guys going to have buffer zones to protect it? Because if we're giving you resource protection, the time, like, it might be time sensitive. It might not be able to last very long if you don't have those conservation easements. It's a description and narrative of the proposal, the project award type, scope, timeline, budget, common things, the overall grant budget, your co-funding requirements, proposal details, and any technical project information, which varies by project type, right? So, okay, that all sounds good. You still want to apply for a grant. Woohoo, woohoo. How do you do it? You need to go into TDEC's grant management system. We have a grant software platform where applicants can go in, create a login, affiliate with a community or an organization, identify TDEC's ARP Resource Protection Grant, and start the application in this virtual platform. And it's really great, right? You get to submit all your documents. We can see what you're doing in real time. We will evaluate it through the grant management system. And it's really handy. We really are happy with the fact that we have this virtual portal. It's going to save a lot of time. You're also required to do all of the common things you need to while using funding assistance, and all of that information can be accessed through the GMS. So how will we review stuff? We're going to form a panel of 3 subject matter experts for each application, for each resource protection category. For all of our major categories: regionalization, reuse, and resource protection. So there'll be a 3-person team that evaluates all of the resource protection stuff together. TDEC will conduct an administrative review, kind of a rough cut, to see if you guys actually completed all of the required information, to determine if that application is able to move on to the next step, which would be a full-blown evaluation and ranking. We're going to use a scoring rubric, and the rubric consists of community level considerations as well as proposal level considerations. We may not award funds to proposals that score less than 70. And technically, TDEC can't really engage with you guys to talk about project specifics during the application period. We're trying to make it truly a competitive process. The grant manual outlines all of this criteria, and it is no mystery, right? You get points for your community level considerations as well as points for your proposal level considerations. It's really important that you demonstrate project outcomes, really establish the need for the project, and those types of things. We're hoping to dedicate 70% of the proposals to construction and 30% of the funding to non-construction proposals, because we really want to encourage folks that have projects that are a really good idea and maybe can only get through the planning and design component based on the timelines that we have, that they still get some funding and get on their way to maybe leading to a construction project in the near future through another funding assistance opportunity, maybe like SRF. So, make sure that you're really tying your demonstrated project outcomes to those, subcategories of stormwater management, stream or wetland restoration, and infrastructure resilience. This terminology is not new to this crowd. I know you guys know, right? Expected increase in pervious land cover at the site scale through native vegetation, stream buffers, right? Like, are you converting an old factory that was on a stream bank in East Tennessee to a park? That will have a significant amount of improved stormwater management and evaluation of converting of that land use cover. Are you having an increase in runoff capture? For the restoration, is your potential minimal, moderate, or high? Things to consider is like, how much of the buffer zone are you restoring? Do you have a conservation easement or not, right? That can affect your restoration potential. I would hesitate to say that I don't think all restoration sites, especially if it's urban, will require that conceptually full-blown conservation easement like we think about with a compensatory mitigation project. I think I'd probably read the grant manual on that section and determine if you have limited or no conservation easement, how well your project will still do. And then think about it, infrastructure resilience in terms of flooding or other weather-related disasters. We're going to consider the feasibility of the project, completion, and the diversity of project types. Applicants, we want to have a good distribution across the state before we make any final funding recommendations. You guys will really have to demonstrate how you're going to meet the co-funding requirements, but we're really trying to be super flexible with that. And it is possible we only may select parts of your proposal for funding, and we may ask you to modify your project based on that. We advise applicants to take any extra time to review the application for accuracy before hitting that submit button, because once you submit it, you can't take it back. So that really covers the competitive resource protection. We don't have a lot of time yet, but I'm going to steal all the rest of this time for you. And I'm more than happy to stay on the line for a little bit if you guys have questions. So last year, we awarded Metro Nashville, Gainsborough, and Bell Buckle all stormwater grants. This is a funding opportunity, and they were about $500,000 a piece. This is a funding opportunity that we're trying to make a solid recurring theme here in the state, specifically for stormwater management and directed at MS4s. But any utility can probably come in and be successful in securing this. We will be releasing a new stormwater grant opportunity that's completely different than resource protection. The amounts are a lot lower. We also have a lot more flexibility, and the timelines are not as structured. And our total funding pot for that is about 1.2 million. So it means that we're probably going to issue 3 to 6 individual grant awards. This is an EPA pseudo-competitive grant that they give states, that states then can turn around and pass through to entities. And that's what TDEC has decided to do. Our preference is that we capture this money and turn it back around right out to you guys to see if we can help fill a funding need. This is how much we have this year, 1.2 million. And all of the things that you think would be eligible for stormwater management, if it helps you comply with the Clean Water Act and your permit requirements, it is eligible. But you have to be SRF eligible also. You can't lack a water quality benefit. Again, can't solely be focused on flood control, and can't really be focused on operation and maintenance either. This is money, though, that we're really directing towards municipalities and municipal entities that have an MPDS for their MS4. We want to support disadvantaged communities with an ATPI of 50 or less. We really want to support rural or small communities with a population of 10,000 or fewer. And we really want to support projects where 50 to 100% of the project consists of green infrastructure. Right now, this is what we're thinking. We haven't published this yet. You guys are the first to see any of this. We're thinking the maximum award is going to be about $500,000 for one grantee, that we will have 3 to 6 OSG awards. Entities with an ATPI of 60 or greater will have a 20% match, whereas if you have an ATPI of 50 or lower, you have no match at all. We'll see if I get that approved by TDEC leadership, but that's what I'm going with, because I think that's pretty good. 80-20 match, and then for those who are financially distressed, no match. That means that we kind of have to put up some money for you guys. So what is the timeline for this other opportunity? Well, you've got more time. We'll probably release the grant manual in September and close the applications in November. So focus on resource protection now. Be listening for us to talk about the OSG, and know that it will kind of follow this timeline. Aside from OSG, the OSG, the stormwater grant, will have a lot of the, we're just going to reuse some of the systems that we built, right? We're going to ask you to make sure that you're uploading your Tennessee Infrastructure Scorecard. If you don't know what that is, we'll be happy to show you. But that is an assessment methodology that uses that red and green, like, is it functioning or is it not functioning, for components of your program. And we're going to do the same thing that we did with resource protection, right? We'll have a panel, we'll have a rubric, we'll go through and score projects and propose to fund projects that score the highest. We've given you guys some resources here to understand what EPA's guidance for the stormwater grant is, what kind of eligibilities there are, and the 2012 memo also, along with information and a demo to the TDEC grant management system. At the same time that the OSG grant is being released through the new funding assistance programs, right? In these smaller amounts, it's not ARP, it's not big and glamorous, these smaller amounts, but these smaller amounts will be around hopefully for the next 5-10 years, right? Maybe longer. We're going to also open up a grant opportunity specifically for asset management plans, and a grant opportunity specifically for lead service line replacement. Now, UMS4s may not be interested at all in lead service line replacement, but you may work for a city that is. So making sure that your communities are aware that we will be providing grants to get the lead out in Tennessee, right? I really want you guys to carry that message too. So with that, I'll be more than happy to take any questions you have. Mario, you got a question?
Hi there. Yeah, I was like, I know how to do the function for the unmute. So hi there. My name is Mario. I work with Williamson County Department of Engineering. And so we're interested in, grant opportunities that you guys have available. But I was curious, do you know of anywhere we can acquire funds for land acquisition for restoration projects?
Yes, so you can use SRF. SRF is an eligible vehicle for land acquisition. So I encourage you to look over this Clean Water SRF Eligibilities Guidebook. There's some specific language they have in there about what would be considered land acquisition that is eligible and not, and follow that. If you find that land acquisition for your particular project is eligible, and it may be possible that you could use the resource protection competitive grant for that, but it may not score as well as somebody who's going in there and really doing a lot of work. It could be a compelling case though. I want to purchase this area, this floodway along the stream where there are houses, and we're going to, get the folks out of the houses and we're going to turn this area to a park. That might have a compelling story. It just depends.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions? So Gray, I see Gray asked a question. For the ARP grant, are different types of conservation easements or protective covenants scored way differently? Let's say we don't have the classic easement, we have a 10-year protection agreement, or it is a public space that has other development restrictions that require. Yes. So yes, Gray, you're right on, right? So they will kind of be, they'll be weighed a little differently, but I do recognize that MS4s do have, like some MS4s, right, have zoning ordinances or restrictive land management rules, laws, whatever, along the buffer zone, and that may be like protection enough. Say the city is doing a project and the city's like, well, of course we're going to acknowledge our restriction for the buffer zone. We're not going to allow a Walmart to go in there now after we tried to fix up this stream. So it surely would qualify. And yeah, really protective covenants and easements are a little more valuable. Has better expectation that restoration potential will be higher. How are stream capacity projects differentiated from flood control projects? So Mark, if you're saying, system capacity. stormwater system capacity. I think I would need to know more about what you mean by that.
Yeah, so system capacity for sure. So the way you know a system doesn't have capacity is that you have a flooding issue, right? So if you've got a stormwater culvert, or if you've got something that's under capacity that is causing a flooding issue, but system capacity projects were identified as eligible, but flood projects were not. So I'm wondering, where's the dividing line there?
So the reason why I asked you what you mean by system capacity, because I'm like, are you talking about gray infrastructure system capacity, or are you talking about natural resource stream capacity, for
I
example?
would say gray. It would be gray. Yeah.
Okay. So first and foremost, proposing a project that will allow your stream to carry more water, right? More capacity is not going to be generally will not be eligible, because that will probably require compensatory mitigation. You might not even get an individual ARP for that. If you are doing culvert, right sizing of a culvert that is creating a hydraulic jump and maybe aquatic resource disconnection, and you are struggling to manage storm flows, replacing that culvert with a more appropriately sized culvert, natural bottom culvert, okay, that's eligible. It may also alleviate some flooding issues, you know, if that undersized culvert's backing up water, right? So I think there are certain capacity, gray infrastructure design, stormwater design components that are eligible. We certainly wouldn't want that to be the only thing, and we would want to see it connected to like water quality benefits or some kind of resource protection benefits.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Quinn?
Yes, am I unmuted? Yeah. Yeah, Quinn Cipher in Knox County. Question for you about applying for two different projects, or lumping it as two different components under the same application. If we had a stream restoration project and a Lowhead Dam removal project, both in the same HUC 12, they're both geared towards, you know, habitat improvement in that same watershed. Would that be better or more competitive as two separate applications, or one application with two separate components?
So that's interesting. So I can go either way, Quinn, and I think it depends on the compelling case that you provide. If you're saying, yeah, you know what, I'm doing this Lowhead Dam removal on this HUC whatever 14 whatever, and in this same sub watershed, we're doing some restorative action, all for the intended benefit of lifting that watershed up, improving the water quality, the aquatic connectivity, the overall health of that sub watershed. I could see that as, you know, together. Now, I think it's also valid to say you could probably split them up. So I think it's dependent on how you think the most compelling case and how you're getting the most points. If you're doing decentralized stormwater management, I don't think a bioretention, bioretention activity in one part of the subwatershed and a bunch of rain gardens in another part of the subwatershed is compelling if those things are disconnected. But, you know, like decentralized stormwater management within a catchment, a subbasin or whatever, I think the more compelling story is putting all of those smaller activities in one big bucket to demonstrate improved water quality benefits.
Thank you. I have one more question, if I may.
Sure.
Would a project where could we use these funds to purchase easements to protect areas on a stream that we would be also improving the buffer on?
Yeah, so that's that land acquisition cost. In general, I say, yeah, there's easement. You can use money to purchase easements. I caution you to look at that Clean Water SRF eligibility guidebook, as well as that 2012 memo that we give the links to, and make sure that you're really in step with that. Separating out just a resource protection land purchase activity, again, may not be compelling and might not glean as many points in and of itself.
Okay, thank you, Vina.
Absolutely. Amanda O'Shea, I see. Should an organization submit one application, or can they submit multiples if it's across watersheds? I mean, if you're talking about a resource protection project that is across watersheds, yeah, really focusing on the water quality and stormwater improvements in a catchment, sub-basin, or watershed scale, and then addressing another watershed, I think those should be separate, right? If you guys are, just think of, one's, totally, I think they should probably be separate. Anybody else?
Bina, there's another, did we get the one about system capacity projects?
Yep.
Okay.
Adrian Ward, are stormwater condition assessments and master planning approved activities so long as the recommended improvements includes the use of green infrastructure? Yes. Do rare species figure in the ranking of land protection projects? Yes. So the ranking, the panel for these, for the panel for this, for the review is going to be folks that you guys are probably super familiar with. Jimmy Smith, Jonathan Burr, and myself are the proposed panelists. So we have a long history of reviewing these projects. If you guys are familiar with having a project in front of us, you probably have some insight into, the line of thinking that we do when we're evaluating stuff. All right, guys.
Sorry, I have
Oh, go ahead, Quinn.
yeah, sorry, another question. Yeah.
For
It's
Mario.
actually
That's
yeah,
Mario.
sorry.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a spinoff of Quinn's question. So I just remembered recently we saw a really like opportune area that we were interested in acquiring a while ago. But if there is like an opportunity for land acquisition funds available, this area is like, it's part of like a land hook, I believe is what it's called, where it's somebody's property is on the other side of the Harpeth River, and they have like a small little piece of land that they can't develop or use. But that was somewhere we were thinking about maybe, using some funds to acquire, and it looks really opportune for like a kayak launch site, which might be used for recreation, but we would really use it for, we have stream cleanups, water monitoring.
Oh yeah, all that
water
would be,
quality.
that kind of use would be fine. I know that kayak launches, like in general can have some hard or gray infrastructure associated with them. Just think of the percentage of the land, right? Like what's the percentage of the land that's going to be having that hard component and the overall, that overall perspective. And if you're out there looking, I think the South Harpeth's got some really great spaces too. Y'all need to,
Correct. That's actually what I was thinking about. There's South Harpeth, and I think the West Harpeth is like covered a lot from City of Franklin. But we're looking at kind of expanding like our infrastructure over there where people can access these areas, and also so that we, when we're doing our water quality monitoring reports, macroinvertebrate testing, that we have access.
You have that good access.
Because
Yeah.
it's been very difficult recently.
Makes sense. And, you might even consider some of that conceptually as you develop your stormwater management plan, program, protocol, right? So those eligibilities, not the operation and maintenance, so not the routine, like I have to go in there and do the sampling all the time, blah, blah, blah. But to start that program up, or maybe to rehabilitate an existing program, or, you know,
Mhm.
like that would be eligible also, you know. So just make sure that you, of course, read the eligibility guidebook and really be thoughtful.
Definitely will do. And then with that, I just wanted to again ask, I know it's still supposed to be competitive, or we're not disclosing everything, but like, so would that impede it at all if this was also like a public access as well? So if it was recreation use with the public too, would that impede it at all?
No. No.
Sweet. Cool. Thank you very much.
All right, guys, it's 4:15. I have a teenager here who is just terribly concerned that I am not going to get her to her destination in time. So if you have any remaining questions, you can submit those to Charlene, and Charlene will definitely make sure that she gets them to me. We also have Lauren with EY on the line, and she may provide her contact information, or you can always email tdec.arp@tn.gov.
Thank you all for participating today. And thank you so much, Vina and Lauren. This has been really, really, really great. If anybody has any other questions, like Vina said, you can send those to her, or send those to me, and I can send those to her as well. If you do not receive a follow-up email from me, do know, I'm sorry,